Hello, I'm Jeffrey K. Mondello, editor of the Boston Catholic Journal. In our last discussion, we had begun to look at the third temptation of Christ, the pathology of power, and why we should tremble. And we left off with Satan's promise to deliver power to Christ, power that he claimed was his to give as he wills and to whom he wills. We looked at power exercised to the detriment of others, and always as an expression of the will to appropriate, to get, to take from others, and to accrue, to amass for oneself, and invariably at the expense of others. We saw that power was always and necessarily relational. It needs others over whom to be exercised. In a word, relationships, occupational, professional, personal, even casual. Now then, we must turn our attention to the sole antidote to the pathogen of power. For there is another relational power, one that is in all its effects contrary to, even remedial of, the relational power of the unbridled will. And this is caritas. I use the Latin because it is much more specific to the connotation of what would otherwise be translated as love, or closer still, charity. Both words in English have acquired too many subsidiary and undesirable meanings to be useful here. Power as caritas, as the munificent expression of the self to the benefit of others, rather than as a pathology expressive of the self as acquisitive to the detriment, the expropriation of others, does not differ in its ability to exercise influence over others, but it differs in orders of magnitude in its perception of others as ends in themselves and not as means to ends that only converge on the self. Power exercises caritas perceives others not in terms of itself and how it can benefit from others. Rather, its focus is the other, to the benefit of the other, not the benefit that it may accrue to itself. In fact, this is what we understand by love, and how we differentiate love from selfishness. In a word, caritas gives where selfishness acquires. Acquisitiveness deprives. Caritas invests. God, St. James tells us, is the giver of every good thing. It is the evil one, the predator, who takes what is not his, who seeks to acquire for himself, ever plundering through taking from, depriving of, what in justice belongs to another, in seeking to acquire that he may corrupt and destroy what he appropriates, that no good may reach fruition or attain to perfection. How many parallels we find in our own lives, and the loss for sorrow, in the lives of many even within the church. from the great dicasteries in Rome to the pettiest of parish councils, how many have acquired and exercise power precisely through relinquishing charity. Unable to reconcile the two, they inevitably opt for one by forfeiting the other. It is a rare man in whom power and charity equitably abide, in whom the exercise of power derives from the obligations of love. This mutuality we construe as the virtue of justice, and we speak of such a man as a just man, in whom power and charity reciprocate rather than conflict. Power is not diminished through the exercise of charity, and charity is not diminished through the exercise of power. It is the just man in the just man that we see a reflection of God. For power and caritas are preeminently attributes of God, in whom alone the perfection and the perfect exercise of each constitutes the divine attribute of justice. Love does not coerce, period. It is not the imposition of the will as an extension of the self. It is an invitation to will the abundance of the other, even to the dispossession of itself. It can only find, realize, authenticate its beneficence through benefiting the other, not itself. The paradigm of perfect love, because the paradigm for all Christians is Christ, is found in the act of loving our enemies, from whom we can hope, anticipate no benefit, no return, nothing that would motivate us through self-interest. This is the possession of power, not over others, which is so easily achieved. It is power over oneself, over all our inclinations, our selfishness, our pride, paradoxically, even over the inducement to power itself. In loving our enemies, we bow down to no one but God, for we refuse to bow down to ourselves, in and through whom alone the perversion of power is possible. But once this perverse ambition for power, so likely, so liable to corrupt, and through its corruption to abuse, it is a direct consequence of the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. Of itself, power is not evil. When that which motivates the exercise of power is caritas, it is a great good. When that which motivates the exercise of power is ambition, it is evil, inasmuch as power becomes no longer the means, but the end. What is meant, given, to be expendable, becomes instead an asset in itself, an asset to preserve and not spend, to augment and not deplete. The self and self-love become the axis of the universe in place of God. It is here that we most clearly see that Satan, as the perverter of power, the one who works to pervert the good, to plunder and then corrupt the good, making it subject to himself. Promised power and unfettered freedom, together with all the riches and esteem of this world, we are invited, seduced by an illusory pledge of happiness, understood in terms through which, ultimately, no happiness is possible. No matter what Satan may promise, he cannot give us happiness, for it is not his to give. But as we have seen, power is. He would have us believe that power and happiness are reciprocal, even synonymous. In effect, that the unfettered exercise of our will brings us the satisfaction, the utter felicity that we long for. Who, upon acquiring the desire of his heart in this world, material or sensual, has ever reposed in happiness? In an instant it passes to another, or ceases to be altogether. We have seen it. It is, after all, how we ourselves have acquired it, by relinquishing of it by another to whom it no longer belongs nor brings any happiness. Among the great cities of man, none is greater, none more vast, none more numerous, more populous, than that in which one and all, without exception, quietly and incessantly attest to this. Necropolis, the vast city of the dead, whom we hedge with cypress and yew, lest we witness what we would deny. We all have within us that weakness, that inheritance of sin from our parents, our first parents, that allurement and terrible susceptibility to sin and temptation, to ascend that seductive and proud summit of power, from which far greater and wiser men precipitously fell into sin and ruin. May God keep us in holy simplicity. God keep